Well, welcome back. Today we're going to look at a technique called focus stacking. Now, if you do a lot of macro photography or close-up of flowers or butterflies or something, you already would experience the problems of keeping your subject sharp from front to back. Now, that's due to the lens being so close to the image. Now, if we go out in the landscape, and we want our landscape to be sharp from front to back, we can just put the lens on, say f16, and normally everything's nice and sharp. Now, where this falls down, when we start doing close-ups, we get a thing called diffraction happen. Now, diffraction basically is a scattering of light at small apertures. You get like a blurring effect, and now that isn't noticeable in landscapes because obviously the objects are a lot smaller in shot. But when we start trying to do close-ups, it becomes more noticeable. So even stopping down to very small apertures doesn't always guarantee you're going to get it all sharp from front to back. So I'm going to show you a technique of shooting our object. It's got to be a static object, I should point that out. Shooting our object, and between each shot we do, we're going to slightly refocus the lens at different parts of the object, and then we can combine those images into one file, which should be sharp from front to back. Okay, so you're probably wondering why I've got this toy dinosaur on the screen. Well, this is just obviously a toy I just grabbed out of the kid's toy box. Now, I shot this at f2.8. Now, I don't do a lot of close-up photography. I certainly don't do any macro photography, so to speak. But occasionally I'll spot something when I'm out and about. Maybe it might be some moss or something on a park bench or something that attracts my eyes, some texture. And I will sometimes do shots like that. But nearly always I'll shoot them very similar to this. I'll focus on one part of the subject, like the face of the dinosaur here. Use a wide aperture. In this case, it's f2.8, and I allow the focus to drop out, and I quite like that effect. But as I said, if you don't like that effect and you're doing closer images than even this, then you're going to have problems getting it sharp. So this is another sample of the same picture. This one was shot at f22, I believe, or yeah, f22, and it looks sharp on screen. It probably looks sharp on the video as well because of the limitations of the screencasting we do. But I can assure you, it's not quite sharp as it should be. And even at f22, I focused a part way in around by the neck here, and it looks fairly sharp, but it does go soft towards the back. So this is what I'm saying. The closer you go in, even with small apertures, you're not going to get the sharpness. So let's move on. I'm going to show you a sample of how I shot something very boring, very mundane. It's just a remote control from a TV, an old one, but it's a good way of showing you, because of all the numbers on there, good example to use to show you how we can keep things nice and sharp. Okay, so here's our rather stunning image. I think you'll agree not, but you can see the reason I picked this remote control out to do this technique on is because there's lots of numbers obviously on there, and it's a good way of showing you how to do this technique. So on this side, on the left-hand side here, this is the image I took. Now, bearing in mind, this image, this isn't really macro photography, and that's where you're really going to benefit when you do real close-ups with this technique. But even so, it's a fairly close shot. On this side, I shot this one at f16, and I focused around this button here on the OK button, this green button, and you can see it's fairly sharp, but towards the back here, the front of the remote control, it's gone a bit blurry, and in the foreground here, it's also a little bit blurry. Now, this one on this side is the result of shooting the focus stacking and combining those, and it is, again, you might not be able to see this on the screencast very well, but I can assure you it is much sharper from front to back. So just wanted to show you that before we progress. Here are the individual pictures I took. This one is focusing on the front here, on the very front edge, then gradually refocused on this area. Again, this one's, I think, on this number 2, and so forth. And as we come further back here, you'll notice the front starting getting blurry again. If you keep your eye up here. So it's getting sharper towards the foreground, but again, it's blurring towards the back. Now, I shot this one at f8 to show you the a good example of this. I didn't want to shoot it too small of aperture, but I shot this at f8, and as you can see, it's not even that acute an angle. If this was a much more angled down, you'll see even more difficulty getting all this sharp. So this isn't a real difficult one for the software, but even so, it's still noticeable. So that's what I shot. I shot about 13 images, and these are what we're going to work with in our software. I just thought I'd bring these up on screen so you can see them a bit better. I actually shot 11 images, not 13, for this particular image. I focused from right the front of the remote control all the way towards the back. Now, the number of images you'll need for this technique will vary, depending on obviously the lens and the aperture you're using. If in doubt, I'd say shoot more than probably you need. If you give the software too few images to work with, you're not going to get a successful image. So better to shoot too many images than too little. Right, so now we'll move on to the software. Now, if you've got Photoshop CS4, you're in luck because it has a feature to do focus stacking automatically for you in there. If you don't have CS4, you can still do this. It's a bit more labor intensive, but there's ways, and we'll try and show you some of that in brief later on in the video. I'm going to be using this software called PhotoAcute Studio. I came across this software about 12 months ago or so. I was doing a video on super resolution images and came across this software, downloaded the demo, was very impressed with it. It does lots of things. It does super resolution images, which means you can produce super resolution images from your camera. It does HDR, and also it does focus stacking and a few other things as well. It's very, very good. You can get download a free demo of it through my site or going straight onto their site. Also, you can also, if you're a member of my site, you can get a discount off this. Not that I'm trying to give it too many plugs, but I don't want you spending money when you don't have to. You might as well get a discount. Yeah, go down and check it out and have a look. I'm not saying this is the only one on the market. There is a few other ones which we'll give a mention. There's one called Combine ZM, which I believe is a Windows only bit of software, but it is free. Don't know what it's like, but you can check that out. There's one called Helicon Focus, which is supposed to be very good. It's not the cheapest one on the market, I don't believe, but that's supposed to be pretty good. But today, as I said, we're going to concentrate on using PhotoAcute for this demonstration. So I've opened PhotoAcute. I'm now going to go to Open, and I'm going to go to our images. I've reduced the size of these just to make this work a little bit quicker, otherwise we'll be here all day. It takes a little bit of while from very high resolution images to load all these. As you can see, this is doing it fairly quickly. Within, just while we're talking about the software, in here there's a thing called settings, and you can actually tell the software what your camera make and model is, what lens you used, and so forth. It can also detect that from the EXIF data from the files, but there's a few settings in there, and basically what we do is very simply just tick all the pictures that we've loaded, like so. Click Start. We can then select the thing we need. As I said, we can do super resolution processing from this, HDR. It can even remove objects from the scene. But all we want to do is depth of field expansion. We don't want to increase the resolution or anything, so we just click that option. Focus stacking, blah 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 blah. Just click OK. And now that will process those pictures and combine all those various images into a single file. Hopefully it should come out the other end with a nice sharp image from front to back. Right, so PhotoAcute's now processed that and output it, and I've saved it, and this is the image here on the right hand side, and as you can see, comparing it to the single image that I shot at f16, on first glance you wouldn't see that it's that much in it, but believe me, there is. As I said, this isn't really the most challenging image you can get. I haven't really gone that close, it's not a macro shot, but even so, you can see if you look at the buttons here, the update button, hopefully you can see this on screen, the combined picture PhotoAcute's produced is sharper from here right up to the top here. It's got a little bit soft on this one shot at f16, so it does work. As I said, it's especially good on images where you're using real macro lenses, very close up. It's also good, on the other hand, now and again, I've never come across it, if you're in a landscape and for whatever reason, maybe you can't use a very long shutter speed and can only use an aperture, say f5.6 or f8. Maybe then you could do something similar. Maybe you've got a foreground tree and you want to keep the foreground tree sharp and the distant images elements in the shot as well. You could then do the same thing, shoot a series of pictures at f8 or f5.6, whatever aperture you've got to use, and then use this software to combine them. So what if you don't want to use another bit of software, you want to do it in Photoshop, but you don't have CS4? Well, let's presume you haven't even got CS3, which we'll go into in a second. Let's say you just got CS or CS1 or CS2, what have you. Well, you still do this. It's a little bit labour intensive, and I'm just going to very sort of briefly explain how to do it. You open your first image, like so. And then what you can do, you need to stack all these images on top of this image into various layers. Now, ideally what you want to do is make sure you number these. So I've numbered them from 1 to 11. I know that 1 was where I focused at the very far end of the remote control, and number 11 is the other end where I focused right in the foreground here. So you need to keep that in mind, because that's important when you come to retouch this. So what you do then is basically open each image, get your move tool, hold down the shift key, and that will make sure that when you drop it onto this image, it's all aligned, like so. So there's that one. That's now called layer 1, just to confuse you. And you keep doing that, we get our next one. And do the same again, hold down a shift key, move tool, and layer on like that. So they're all should be nicely aligned, and you keep doing that until you've loaded all your images into this one file. So what if you've got CS3 like I'm using here? Well, life just gets a bit easier for you. If you go to File, Scripts, you'll see here a menu which says Loads Files into Stack. Now if you open on that, you can click the Browse button, and if you browse to your images, there's number 1 down through to number 11, and click Open, and click this button, Attempt to automatically align source images. What that'll do is do all the hard work for you. It's going to load all those images all into a single file, layered file I should say, a PSD file, and that just saves you all that moving and dragging around. And it's now going to align them for me to make sure they all align properly. Sometimes you do this, you may have to crop the edges if you get a bit of overlapping, but because we've used a tripod and we've been a bit careful, we shouldn't have too many problems, he says. So I'm just going to let that run, and then we'll come back in a couple of seconds. Okay, so that script's now run, so we're back where we would have been if we had been manually dragging these files into the image. So they're all loaded. Now what we can do now is leave our background image as it is, but on each of these other layers you need to hold down the Alt key and press Add Layer Mask, and that'll add a layer mask which is hidden. It's hiding the image at this point. So hold the Alt key, click Add Layer Mask on each one, like so. Again, if you imagine you had 30 of these files, again it would get a bit tedious, but there we go. So now you have to remember which layer corresponds to what part of the image. Now I know image 1 was my very top edge where I focused there, so what I can do is then just get a brush tool with white, just find my pen, and we can just basically start to reveal that edge by painting on it like so. It's got a bit too far, you can always press the X key to bring that back. So it's a little bit hit and miss. you've got to be a bit careful, but because you're going on a layer mask, we can just obviously paint back over that to correct any mistakes that we make. And next layer, I know that I focused on this edge here where these buttons were, so I can basically just go in and paint those. So I think you get the idea now. You can go through the image and gradually paint in the parts that should be in focus. Now, it is a bit hit and miss because you've got to make sure you get all the right edges and this, that, and the other. So it's not my idea of fun, shall we say? But as I said, if there's a will, there's a way. There is a way of doing it. But personally, I'd rather use a bit of software to do it for me to save a bit of time. But there we go. But that shows you it is possible to do it that way, just within any old copy of Photoshop. So there we go. So to finish off, we're just going to give you a very brief camera settings guidelines for doing this. It's fairly straightforward. It's just common sense, but we'll go through that next and round everything off. Okay, so I'm just going to go over a few of the camera settings. There's nothing that involved, just a few things just to keep in consideration. First of all, steady tripod. As I said earlier, you can only do this with the static objects. You can't do anything with any objects that move. I think that makes pretty much sense. Cable release, not essential but advised. Also not essential but advised is to, if you can lock your camera mirror up, do that, and that stops any camera shake. Manual focus, I think that goes without saying. You can't do this on autofocus. You need to use manual focus and just think ahead a little bit. Have a bit of a plan of what part of the image you're going to start to focus on, and just run through it. Do a little run through, dry run, and just get into the swing of how you're going to actually shoot this object. So you'd obviously start one end of the subject and just make small adjustments to the focus all the way through the image, the object, until you've got all your images completed from front to back. Now, I did say we were going to finish up there, but before we go, I decided to go out and actually try and shoot some landscapes using this focus stacking and see how useful it might be. And what I did, I went to a local churchyard. I don't hang out in churchyards very often, I might add, but I thought it'd make a good location just to do this bit of experiment. So I did two shots. I did the shot on top here, which I'm going to show you in a minute, with a 40mm focal length with the tree in the foreground and the church in the background, and then I went in with a wide angle, quite low down, quite wide, and did a shot there. Now, with this particular image, let me just bring these up a minute. But with both these, I shot them on f5.6. I did one at f22 as well, so we had a comparison. Now, what I found with this image with the wide angle was that the one I shot at f22 and the one where I've combined the images shot at f5.6, there's very little in it at all. Now, we do have to remember that with wider lenses, we've got that much more depth of field with those lenses. So shooting at f5.6 or f8 or what have you on a wide-angle lens is going to give you quite a bit more depth of field than maybe on a standard or even a longer lens. So, you know, you need to go and experiment. This is not obviously an in-depth experiment. I just went out with the camera, took a few snapshots, and see what I got. So I think my conclusion from this little shot with the wide angle is that you can actually get good sharpness by using the focus stacking, but probably very likely you'll probably never need to use it with wide angle lenses, but you never know. So next we'll move on to our other image, which was shot with a 44mm focal length. Okay, so these are the images I shot. We're on a 44mm, so nearly between a wide and a standard in focal length. This is the one I shot at f22, just a single frame, and this is what we're going to be comparing all the other images to. The rest of these I shot at f5.6, and I started off by focusing on the tree, and then slowly moved back through the image, refocusing the camera. So those are our frames to work with. Okay, so these are our files I've output. This is just the straight shot at f/22 in camera, and this one is the combined focus stacking images combined together. So I haven't sharpened these or anything or processed them to any high degree. They're pretty much straight out of camera. There's a little bit of sharpening applied to them, but not much. So the f/22 image, as it is on this side, I think we'll start off by looking at this viewing at 100%. By the way, this is viewed at 100%, and you can see the church window here. And I think there is little in it, really. Still, again, what you will notice is these branches. Now, I said to you earlier, focus stacking, you need to have a static subject. Now, obviously, the church ain't going nowhere, but there was a very slight breeze on the day I shot these, very slight, but even so, you can see we've got some movement in the branches and stuff there. Foreground-wise, here's the tree. I think this is looking pretty good as well. I think it's a pretty close match between those two, and I think the only thing you got to watch really is any movement in your shot, like we've got here, a bit of a problem. So, I think from this little quick experiment, I think it's obvious you can use focus stacking. Whether you'll ever need to use it is another matter. Certainly with wide-angle lenses, I think the answer to that is very, very unlikely. With longer lenses, I think it's a possibility. So it might well be a technique you may never use, but it's still worth learning. If you do close-up work and macro work, then it's going to be a very, very handy technique for you to know and use. So that's about it. I hope you've enjoyed this video tutorial and you've learnt something of use, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks for watching. Cheers.